My very first guest here at CFS Plus is no one less than Her Royal Highness, the Crown Princess Mary of Denmark, who is the patron of Global Fashion Agenda, and actually the only speaker that has been speaking as a keynote speaker at every single Copenhagen Fashion Summit since 2009. She is a strong advocate for sustainability and a big humanitarian, and with a strong focus, especially also on women across the world. Your Royal Highness, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me here in now the almost empty concert house, where we usually have all of our international friends and voices from all over the world.
It is quite a contrast.
It is.
And, you know, it reflects the times we are living in right now. I mean, the worrying times. And it is sad, because it's so nice to meet people from all corners of the globe, to be able to hear everyone's different reflections and great ideas and innovations. But we'll continue to do that. You've planned a great 2 days.
We have. Some of them are going to be brought to life in pre-produced pieces where we come even closer, I would say, because we're at their homes or closer to them for longer times. And then we are also going to deliver like live Zoom set-up panels where some of those important discussions and debates are going to happen. So it's going to be 2 exciting days still.
Well, I think credit to you and your team, because what you've been able to put together, this dynamic forum, a lot of great content, amazing speakers from all over the world that people are going to be able to tune into. Of course, we'll miss the social side.
Definitely. And even the distance
we
have between us.
But that's, we have to have respect for the time we're in. And we have to think creatively and innovatively to find ways to keep moving towards the goal of creating a sustainable fashion industry.
Yeah. It's definitely been a difficult year. I mean, COVID obviously has impacted everybody, but not least the fashion industry, with lockdowns and stores were closed and, you know, big impacts on the supply chain. But how has it been for you and your life?
Yeah, like everyone, our life has been turned on its head. I mean, we're living and experiencing a global pandemic, the worst health crisis in 100 years. We've seen how societies all around the world have been closed down from one day to the next, where our freedom of movement, which we cherish so deeply, has been so incredibly restricted. And also, of course, the tragedy of losing loved ones. And, you know, we're still in the middle of it. But I think we have to remain optimistic. And as you said, even though our priorities understandably have shifted to deal with COVID and manage the crisis, we have to continue to work collectively on achieving the goals we set before COVID.
The year of COVID-19 has, of course, also impacted the supply chain and some of the sort of weakest links of fashion, namely for the workers. And I know that you've been traveling and you've seen, you know, not this year, but previous years also, you know, met people in the supply chain and seen the conditions they're working on. So how has that affected your view on things this year, thinking of them?
Well, COVID has had broad-reaching impact and consequences in all corners of the globe and in all areas of our societies. And when crisis strikes, the most poor and vulnerable are disproportionately affected. And we know the fashion industry is a huge employer. And the majority of those employed are women. And you're right, I traveled to Bangladesh and I had the opportunity to visit a factory and some workers, talked to some of the workers there. And if we take Bangladesh as an example, I mean, that's a country that is very dependent on the textile industry. 80% of their export is through textile and fashion. So, and they put 4 million people are employed, and 85% of them are women.
Yeah.
And we already know today that 1 million garment workers have been laid off. Now, the factory that I visited, maybe it's not completely representative of all the factories in Bangladesh, but we know that a job and financial independence gives enormous security and hope for the future. I spoke with a number of women there and heard about what it means from them to be unemployed. And the contrast of having a job to not having a job is stark indeed. These women have become financially independent. They are able to support their family and also their local communities. They have a voice in their families and in their communities because they have financial independence. They also are able to invest in their children, their health, their education. So I can imagine for these women that have lost their job because of reduced production and factory closures, that they're in a very dire situation.
The topical headline for Copenhagen Fashion Summit was Redesigning Growth originally, but then COVID hit, and then obviously companies were already degrowing. So when we launched the new digital CFS Plus, we decided to have a topical headline called Redesigning Value, to also sort of encompass a little bit more other notions and maybe even a philosophical approach to what value means to us. But what does it make you think of?
Well, when I think of value, I think when we originally, value is always looked at as a monetary value.
Yeah.
And today there's so many other more important things that add value. I don't think you can argue that if you're going to achieve continued commercial success, that you can have that without understanding the link to sustainability. So if you look at value from a consumer perspective, I would say that today, and we see changes in consumer behavior and a need to understand or an awareness of the product. What is it made of? What are the materials? Are they sourced responsibly and environmentally? Or who made this product? What was the environment in which the product was made? For some people, those are very, very important values. And they add another non-monetary you have to use the word value again, to a product or a service. And then if you look at the way we are consuming fashion today, we're seeing a much greater market for second-hand, for recycled, upcycled. And I'm thinking that this is another value because it tells a history of the product. Who's worn it before? Where's it been? What's its journey? What's impact has it had in its production, in its life, on the environment? How much waste has been used to making this product, and how the people that made it, were they treated fairly? So I think consumers beginning to see more and more that value is much more than the price on the ticket. And I think also if you look at investors, they're understanding also that if they're going to have a good long-term investment, they need to look at companies and brands that also have a sustainable business model and policies, that it's also the human and environmental aspects that give value to a company and return on their investment. And then I think also if you look at companies and brands, that they need to also, I think they already do, and they know that they need to change the way they're doing business because of consumer demand, but also of that collective commitment of the industry to create a sustainable future and a sustainable industry, that they need to, through innovation, technology, transparency, responsibility, to create products and services that have sustainability built in them, so that it is simply a gift with purchase.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm totally that prosperity and what creates value is much more broader as a term than just the hardcore cash economic value that we used to value.
Yeah, and I think absolutely, and I think it's clear for everyone that our economic stability is dependent on our natural resources.
Yeah,
and we have to enhance them, preserve them, protect them, because they underpin our economic stability.
Yeah. I think this conversation also about value is really essential for consumers as well. And I'm sure that that's one of the reasons that this trend, or whatever we may call it, trend sounds like it's passing, but that it's picking up with the public to look at what is valuable to me. And how do I want to spend my time and my money, and what matters, and looking more deeply also into the products we buy and having that type of consciousness. I think COVID has forced that forward as well, in a good way.
Yeah. Really, we have to remind ourselves that changing behavioral change is a long-term event. It doesn't happen overnight. And though we saw with COVID that we could create behavioral change from one day to the next, and you can also see as soon as there becomes a bit fatigue in it and things look brighter, we begin to slip back to our old ways. And this, I think, is where we really have to be collectively strong and resolute and say, we're not going to allow this behavior, this new found, I wouldn't call it desire, but need to know what the product is made of, where it's from, how it's impacted the environment, who's made it, were they treated fairly, that this becomes a new norm, a new way of thinking, a new way of valuing. And that's where the industry has to take this moment and run with it and create that sustainable future that, I know you've said it before, is the only future.
Thank you.